My name is Kalen Voss, and I used to be a pilot. Not the heroic kind you see in recruitment vids, with perfect jawlines and medals on their chests. I was a cargo hauler, a grunt who flew supply runs between Earth and the Martian colonies. I had a temper, a drinking problems, and a debt I couldn't shake. So when the Earth-Mars coalition caught me smuggling unlicensed biomaterials, they didn't bother with a long trial. They gave me a choice: a firing squad, or a one-way ticket to the Val's Marinerist deep mine. I chose the mine. I should have chosen the bullets. The Val's Marinerist trench isn't just a canyon. It's a scar on the face of Mars, 10 times deeper than Earth's Grand Canyon. A wound that cuts nearly 7 kilometers into the planet's crust. And at the bottom of that wound, the Coalition had drilled a shaft called the Charybdis Descent. They called it a mining operation. But everyone knew the truths. Charybdis was a graveyard. The pressure down there could crush a tank. The heat from the planet's core turned the tunnels into ovens. And the radiation trapped in the dense rock, bouncing back and forth like a caged demon, gave you about 6 months before your cells forgot how to replicate. The Coalition sent their criminals there to dig for rare Earth elements until their bodies gave out. Nobody ever came back. I remember the day they shoved me into the descent pod. It was a rusted coffin with a heat shield and a prayer. The wardens, a cold woman named Commander Thorne, looked at me through the viewport. Her eyes were the color of old ice. "Voss," she said, "you'll work the lower shafts. Maintenance shift. You break, we don't fix you." "Understood." I nodded, too numb to speak. The pod detached from the orbital station and fell. For 23 minutes, I plummeted through the thin Martian air, then through the dark throat of the Charybdis shaft. The pod shook like a dying animal. Alarms screamed. I closed my eyes and thought of the ocean on Earth, something I'd never see again. When the pod finally slammed to a stop, the hatch opened onto a world of fire and shadow. The maintenance tunnels were a labyrinth of corroded metal walkways, hissing steam vents, and walls that wept a brackish, mineral-rich fluid. The other prisoners didn't look at me. They were hollow-eyed things, shuffling between shifts, their skin mottled with radiation burns. My job was to crawl into the deepest, most unstable sections of the mine, the places where automated machinery failed, and repair them by hand. No suit, just a respirator, a heat-shielded jacket, and a toolkit. The ambient temperature hovered near 55 degrees Celsius. The air smelled of sulfur and ozone. For 3 months, I survived. I learned to ignore the constant tremor in my hands. I learned to sleep through the low, groaning sound of the planet's crust shifting overhead. I made one friend, an old geologist named Mira, who'd been down there for 11 months. She had the same hollow look as the others, but her eyes still held a spark. "You're not like the rest, Kalen," she told me one night in the mess hall. "You still get angry. That's good. Anger burns, keeps the dark out." I didn't know what she meant then. I would. Soon enough. Middle. The trouble started on day 97. I was in the lowest accessible tunnel, Section 9K, repairing a failed atmospheric scrubber. The tunnel was barely wide enough for my shoulders. The rock walls were hot to the touch, and a strange, crystalline formation glowed faintly in the dark, a bioluminescent mineral no one had bothered to catalog. I was tightening a bolt when my hand slipped. The wrench clattered into a crevice. As I reached for it, my fingers brushed against something that wasn't rock. It was smooth, cold, and it was moving. I yanked my hand back. Hard hammerings. The glow from the crystals pulsed. Once, twice, and then the entire tunnel shuddered. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, not machinery, but something organic. A vibration that I felt in my teeth and my marrow. The rock face in front of me cracked. A seam opened, wide as a door, and from the darkness beyond spilled a light that was not light. It was information. It was data given form. I stared into that glow. And for a moment, I understood everything. The thing that lived beneath Mars was not a creature. It was a relic, a sentient, dormant intelligence left behind by a species that had died out before Earth's first bacteria learned to swim. They had called themselves the Analect. They were not borns. They were grown from the fabric of spacetime itself, and their minds were cities the size of moons. They had seeded Mars with life. Once, then something had come across the void, a cosmic predator. A silence that consumed consciousness. The Analect had fled into hibernation, burying themselves in the cores of dead worlds. The thing beneath Charybdis was the last one, and it was waking up. The light touched me, and I screamed, not in pains, but in the sheer overwhelming force of contact. The Analect's mind poured into mine like a river through a keyhole. I saw their history, a billion years of art, war, love, and loss. I saw the predator, a living void called the Nyxian harvest. It had no shape, no form, only an endless hunger for thought. It had devoured the Analect's homeworld. It had followed their retreat across the galaxy. And now, drawn by the faint signal of the last relic, it was turning toward Sol, toward Earth. The connection broke. I collapsed onto the tunnel floor, gasping. My nose was bleeding. My ears rang with a frequency that wasn't sound. When I opened my eyes, the crystalline formation was dark. The seam in the rock had sealed itself, but something had changed inside me. I could feel the Analect's presence now, like a second heartbeat, buried deep in my chest. It had given me a gift, the ability to interface with its dormant systems, and a warnings. In 72 days, the Nyxian harvest would reach Mars. If it found the last Analect, it would consume not only the relic, but every mind in the solar system, human, artificial, even the faint neural echoes of animals. There would be no wars, no invasions, just silence. I stumbled back to the main habitation module and found Mira. She was the only one I trusted. I told her everything, my voice shaking, my hands still trembling from the contact. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The Coalition knows." "What?" "They know something is down here," she said, her eyes hard. "Why do you think they dug this mine?" "They weren't looking for rare earth metals. They were looking for the relics. Commander Thorne's real job isn't running a prison. It's running a cover-up. They've been trying to wake the Analect for years. They just didn't know how." I felt the anger Mira had talked about. It flared white-hot in my chest. They had sent me here to die. Yes, but not just as punishment. I was an experiment. Another disposable test subject to throw at the relic and see what happened. Except I hadn't died. I had been changed. "We have to stop the harvest," I said. The Analect showed me how. Its defensive systems are still intact, but they need a pilot, a living mind to interface with the core. Mira looked at me like I'd just volunteered to walk into the sun. "That would kill you, Kaelan. The neural load alone. It's going to kill everyone if I don't." I stood up. My legs were unsteady, but my voice wasn't. "Get me to the surface. Get me to a comms array. I need to talk to Commander Thorne." Ending. She didn't believe me at first. Why would she? I was a convict, a drunk, a dead man walking. But when I described the Analect's core systems in precise, impossible details, no human could know, her ice chip eyes finally cracked. She authorized a quarantine breach. 24 hours later, I stood on the surface of Mars for the first time in 4 months. The sky was the color of bruised peaches. The dust storms howled on the horizon. And above me, invisible to the naked eye, the Nyxian harvest was already casting its shadow. Thorne gave me a ship. Not a warship. The Coalition had nothing that could fight a cosmic predator. She gave me a Surveyor-S shuttle, stripped of everything non-essential, and a direct link to the Charybdis relic. The plan was insane. I would fly into the path of the harvest, interface with the Analect S core from the Shuttle S cockpit, and activate a weapon that hadn't been used in a billion years. The weapon was called the Lucid Echo. It worked by broadcasting the entire history of a conscious mind, every memory, every emotion, every dream into the void. The Nyxian harvest fed on thought, but it could not digest a life. The echo would overload its senses, forcing it to retreat. In theory, in practice, it meant I had to open my mind completely. No filters, no defenses. The harvest would taste every shameful moment, every failure, every regret I'd ever buried. And the Analect S systems would amplify that signal a trillion-fold. The neural feedback would probably liquefy my brain within minutes. But minutes would be enough. I strapped into the Shuttle S pilot seat. Mira's voice came through the comm, thin and cracked. You don't have to do this. Kalen, we can find another way. There is no other way. I said, and I meant it. The shuttle lifted off. I flew toward the Harvest S approach vector, a region of space that looked empty but felt like a wound. The darkness thickened as I got closer. My instruments flickered. The temperature in the cockpit dropped. I could feel it now. The Harvest S presence. A vast, cold intelligence that was not malevolent so much as indifferent. It did not hate me. It did not even see me. I was a spark in a hurricane. I closed my eyes and reached for the Analect S core. The connection snapped into place like a key turning a lock. And then I was everywhere. I was 6 years old, falling off a bike and scraping my knee. I was 20, drunk in a bar, shouting at a woman who loved me. I was 35, watching my father die of cancer, holding his hand as he whispered, "You were always enough." I was all of it, the pains, the joy, the terrible beauty of being alive. The Analect took that torrent of memory and shaped it into a wave. I felt my thoughts leaving me, peeling away like layers of skin. The harvest touched the wave and recoiled. For the first time in eons, it encountered something it could not consume. A life fully lived, with all its contradictions intact. It shrieked across a frequency no human ear could hear. And then it fled. The darkness lifted. The stars returned. I woke up in a medical bay. 3 weeks later, Mira was sitting beside my bed, her radiation-scarred face wet with tears. "You're an idiot," she said. "You're the biggest idiot I've ever met." Did it work? My voice was a whisper. My body felt like a cracked vase, barely holding together. It worked. The harvest is gone. Turned tail and ran past the Uit cloud. Coalition scientists are calling it a miracle. I tried to smile. They were not going to call it that when they find out a convict saved them. Mira laughed, a sound like breaking glass. About that, Commander Thorne had a change of heart. Your sentence has been commuted. Unofficially, you're being reassigned. To what? She leaned closer. The Analect won't talk to anyone else. Only you. They want you to stay on Mars. Not as a prisoner. As an ambassador. I stared at the ceiling of the medical bay. Somewhere beneath me, buried in the hot, dark depths of the planet, an ancient intelligence was waiting. It had chosen me, a broken, angry, forgotten man, to speak for it. They had sent me into the depths of Mars to die. But I had found something down there that no execution could touch. I had found a purpose. I turned my head toward Mira. "Tell Thorne I'll do it," I said. "But I want a better room. And no more respirator shifts." She grinned. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Ambassador Voss." Outside the viewport, the Martian dust storms raged on. But for the first time in months, I could see the stars. And I knew they weren't empty anymore.